The royal palace of Kath shone like a jewel under the twin suns, its spires glistening with the radiant hues of a setting sky. Inside its grand hall, Princess Vil sat upon her high throne, her violet eyes scanning the room filled with eager suitors. They were the finest the galaxy had to offer, warriors, diplomats, and rulers from dozens of star systems, all hoping to win her hand. Each one had come bearing gifts of unimaginable wealth, rare crystals that shimmered with inner light, entire. Fleets of warships and promises of alliances that could strengthen her empire. Yet, despite their grandeur, Vil remained unimpressed. "Enough," she declared, her voice echoing through the vast chamber. "I have no interest in a consort. None of you are worthy." A ripple of shock passed through the gathered suitors. Murmurs of disbelief spread among the attendants, but no one dared to openly challenge her. Everyone knew that Vil was as stubborn as she was brilliant. For years, the Royal Council had urged her to marry, insisting that a strong union would fortify the kingdom. Yet Vil believed she needed no one. Her sharp intelligence, unwavering resolve, and unmatched diplomatic skills had already secured her place as a respected leader. To her, marriage was nothing more than a distraction, a political tool that others use to consolidate power. "I refuse to settle for someone who sees me as a prize," she continued. "This contest is over." Just as she was about to rise from her throne and dismiss the assembly, her chief advisor, an elder statesman named Kell, stepped forward. His wise, aged eyes met hers with a knowing gaze. "Your Highness," he said, his voice calm and measured, "there is one more participant." Vil's expression hardened. "I have seen enough. What more could there possibly be?" Kell did not waver. "The humans have sent a representative." At this, the room erupted in laughter. Humanity was a species still new to the galactic stage, barely, scratching the surface of interstellar politics. They were known for their boldness and tenacity, but their lack of influence made them an unlikely contender for an imperial match. Surely, no human could be a serious suitor. Vil's lips pressed into a thin line. "A human? This is a waste of my time." "Perhaps," Kell acknowledged, his expression unreadable. "But they insisted, and you did vow to meet all suitors regardless of their origin." She exhaled sharply, irritation flickering across her face. "Very well, let us get this over with." The grand doors at the far end of the hall creaked open, revealing a lone figure stepping into the chamber. Unlike the other suitors who adorned themselves in elaborate robes or ceremonial armor, this man wore a simple uniform, dark, practical, and unembellished. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, and his posture carried a casual confidence that contrasted sharply with the rigid formality of the other suitors. Captain Elias Grant walked forward, unfazed by the murmurs and skeptical glances thrown his way. He stopped before the throne and gave a respectful nod. "Princess Vil," he greeted, his voice steady. "I won't waste your time with grand gestures or empty promises. I was invited, so I came. But before I make any declarations, I'd like to understand who you are." A stunned silence fell over the court. This was unheard of. Every suitor had approached Vil with reverence, with carefully rehearsed proclamations of devotion or ambition. Yet this human, this outsider, stood before her with neither pretense nor submission. He did not try to impress her, he simply was. Vil's curiosity piqued, though she did not let it show. Instead, she arched an elegant brow. "Very well. I will allow you one audience," she said, her tone neutral. "But do not waste my time, human." Elias inclined his head slightly, a faint smirk playing at his lips. "I wouldn't dream of it." She rose from her throne and strode towards a private chamber, motioning for him to follow. The walls of the chamber were adorned with intricate carvings depicting the legendary rulers of Kath. A soft golden glow from hidden lights bathed the room in an aura of quiet authority. Vil took her seat across from Elias, her piercing violet, eyes never leaving his face. She studied him like a puzzle, trying to discern his motivations. Elias, for his part, remained completely at ease. He leaned back slightly in his chair, his gaze steady but respectful. Vil found his calm demeanor unusual. Most suitors were either overwhelmed by her presence or desperate to prove themselves. This human, however, acted as if he belonged there, despite the galaxy seeing him as an outsider. "You are not like the others," Vil remarked, her voice sharp and measured. "Every suitor before you has arrived with gifts, declarations of loyalty, or elaborate displays of power. Yet you come empty-handed. Why?" Elias smiled faintly. "Because I don't think you're looking for someone to flatter you. You've already turned away the most powerful and wealthy beings in the galaxy. I figured you've had enough of that." Vil's eyebrow arched slightly. "You assume you know what I want?" "I don't," Elias admitted. "But I know what I can offer: honesty, perspective, and someone who sees you as a person, not a throne." His words were simple, yet they struck a chord. Vil's expression remained unreadable, but deep inside, she felt the flicker of something unexpected. This human was different. He did not see her as an untouchable ruler or a conquest. He spoke to her as an equal. That was rare, almost unheard of. "Honesty, you say?" Vil leaned forward slightly, her gaze narrowing with intrigue. "Then let us test that. Tell me, Captain Grant, what is it that you truly seek? Does humanity truly seek an alliance from this contest? Or is it merely another test to prove its worth in the galaxy?" Elias chuckled softly at the question. "All fair questions," he admitted. "The truth is, humanity doesn't expect to win. We're new to the galactic stage, and most of the other species see us as underdogs. But I came here because I believe humanity has something unique to offer, a different way of seeing things. We're not afraid to try what others won't, and we value connection over conquest." Vil leaned back, crossing her arms, studying him with sharp eyes. "Bold words," she mused. "But how can a species so young and untested bring something new to an empire as ancient as mine?" Elias met her gaze with quiet confidence. "Because we've learned to survive by adapting. We don't have the strongest ships or the most advanced technology, but we've endured countless challenges by thinking differently. Sometimes the simplest solutions come from the most unexpected places." For a moment there was silence. Vil turned his words over in her mind, searching for arrogance or weakness, but all she saw was sincerity. Finally, she inclined her head, slightly. "I will allow you to remain in this contest, Captain Grant," she said, "but do not think for a moment that I will go easy on you." Elias smiled. "I wouldn't want it any other way." As he left the chamber, Vil found herself feeling an unfamiliar sense of anticipation. For the first time, a suitor had left her curious about what might happen next. The first trial was announced the next day in the grand arena of Karth, a marvel of alien engineering. Floating platforms hovered above the ground, shimmering force. Fields flickered in and out of existence, and holographic displays projected the faces of the contestants. The trial was designed to test suitors on intellect and problem-solving abilities, qualities that Princess Vil valued above brute strength. Elias stood among the other suitors, a stark contrast to the towering warriors and sleek diplomats around him. Most of them ignored him, too busy flaunting their confidence. One, a hulking reptilian from the planet Thras, sneered down at him. "You're out of your league, human," the Thryn growled. "Go back to your primitive little planet." Elias smiled calmly. "Let's see how primitive my ideas look when this is over." The trial began with a booming announcement from the royal advisor, Kell. Contestants must solve a crisis simulation, a fleet stranded in hostile space with limited resources. Victory will go to the one who not only survives, but ensures the safety of every crew member. Holographic displays flickered to life, showing each contestant's virtual fleet. The other suitors immediately sprang into action, barking orders to the simulation's AI, deploying advanced strategies, and relying on their species' superior technology. Elias, however, paused. He studied the situation, tapping his fingers. Against the edge of the console, seated on her royal dais, Vil watched the contestants intently. She couldn't help but notice the human's unhurried approach. Was he stalling, or was this another one of his strange, deliberate strategies? Elias finally made his move. Instead of pushing his fleet forward, he redirected his resources to scan for hidden dangers. Within moments, he uncovered a cloaked ambush set up in the simulation, a detail many of the other contestants had missed. While the others struggled to recover from the surprise attack, Elias had already maneuvered his fleet into a defensive position. The holographic battlefield shifted rapidly. Elias didn't have the firepower to overpower the simulated enemies directly, so he used unorthodox tactics. He disabled enemy ships by targeting weak points in their systems, conserving his resources while protecting his crew. The spectators murmured in surprise. While most suitors relied on brute force, the human was thinking outside the box. Even Vil leaned forward slightly, her curiosity growing. By the end of the simulation, only two fleets remained intact, Elias's and the Thasian's. The Thasian had destroyed more enemies, but at the cost of half his fleet. Elias, on the other hand, had not only kept his fleet intact, but had also rescued a stranded civilian ship hidden in the simulation. Kel's voice echoed across the arena. The human has passed the trial. His fleet remains intact, his crew safe, and his decisions ensured minimal casualties. The Thasian growled, in frustration, glaring at Elias, but the human simply shrugged. "Adapt and survive," he said lightly. Vil smirked from her throne. For the first time, a suitor had surprised her, not with power or wealth, but with ingenuity. Perhaps this human wasn't as primitive as everyone thought. The next trial would be a cultural challenge, one Princess Vil had designed herself. She believed that understanding the traditions and values of KTH was essential for anyone who aspired to stand by her side. The suitors were tasked with mastering the sacred Kithon, an intricate ritual dance that symbolized unity, discipline, and respect for Kath's ancient heritage. As the trial was announced, murmurs of uncertainty rippled through the suitors. Many came from warrior cultures that valued combat prowess over artistry. But Elias stood quietly, his expression unreadable. Vil watched him carefully. Would he falter here, unable to bridge the vast gulf between his species and hers? Or would he once again prove that humanity's greatest strength was its ability to adapt? The challenge was set, and the stage was waiting. The art of soul sculpting was a revered practice that combined craftsmanship with deep emotional expression. Each suitor was tasked with creating a sculpture that symbolized their understanding of Kithan culture and values. In the Grand Hall of Artisans, the suitors gathered around shimmering blocks of Zram, a rare and mysterious material that responded to the emotions and intent of its sculptor. These blocks were notoriously difficult to shape, requiring not just precision, but also a profound emotional connection to the story the artist wished to tell. Elias stood before his block, feeling the immense weight of the task before him. Around him, the other suitors had already begun their work, their techniques as diverse as their species. The Thasian suitor used brute strength, carving bold, angular shapes into the material. The sleek, multi-limbed Geran sculptor manipulated, the Zram with delicate, intricate patterns that seemed almost impossible to achieve. From a balcony above, Vil watched with an expression that was cool and distant. She had little faith in the human's ability to succeed in this trial. After all, what could a species so new to the galactic stage possibly understand about the rich and ancient culture of the Kith? Elias stared at the block, his mind racing. He had read about Kithan culture during his journey to the planet, but the information was fragmented and incomplete. He realized that if he simply tried to mimic the others, he would fail. Instead, he decided to take a different approach. One, rooted in humanity's greatest strength, storytelling. Taking a deep breath, Elias placed his hands on the block. The Zeram was cool to the touch, but as he closed his eyes and focused, it began to warm. He thought about everything he had learned about the Kith, their values of unity, resilience, and balance. But he also thought about humanity and how it had overcome countless challenges through collaboration and adaptability. Slowly, the block began to shift under his hands. The material softened and stretched, responding to his thoughts and emotions. Unlike the rigid precision of the other suitors, Elias's movements were fluid and intuitive. The onlookers murmured in confusion, unable to predict what he was creating. Hours passed, and finally, the sculptures were complete. The suitors stepped back, revealing their creations. The Thasian sculpture was a towering symbol of strength. The Janus's was a delicate masterpiece of complexity. But it was Elias's sculpture that made the room fall silent. His creation was a spiral of interconnected forms, each representing a different species, all supporting one another to reach a shared pinnacle. It was simple yet profound, symbolizing unity and diversity, a core value of Kithan culture that many of the other suitors had overlooked. Vil's eyes widened as she studied the sculpture. For the first time, a suitor had captured not just the surface of her culture, but its very essence. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm but laced with curiosity. "You surprise me again, human." Elias gave a small smile. "Maybe there's more to humanity than meets the eye." For the first time, Vil felt a flicker of doubt about her earlier judgments. Perhaps this human was worth keeping an eye on after all. The palace buzzed with energy after the latest trial. Whispers of Elias's surprising success spread through the court like wildfire. Some admired his ingenuity, while others scoffed, convinced that his luck would soon run out. Among the suitors, however, resentment began to fester. In a shadowed alcove, Gorth, the Thasian suitor, sat with two others, their expressions twisted with frustration. "That human," Gorth growled, his claws scraping against the polished table. "He's an insult to this contest. How dare a creature from a backwater planet outshine us?" "Agreed," said another suitor, his serpentine features contorted in anger. "If we let him continue, he might win her favor." "That cannot happen," Gorth hissed, his eyes gleaming with malice. "Then we ensure it doesn't." The following morning, the court gathered for the third trial, a test of survival instincts. The contestants were to navigate the maze of an ancient Kithan labyrinth filled with shifting walls, holographic traps, and simulated dangers. The goal was to reach the central chamber and retrieve the Star Stone, a rare artifact said to represent clarity of thought. Elias stood at the entrance of the maze, his usual calm demeanor masking a growing sense of unease. He could feel the tension among the suitors, particularly from Gorth, whose glares were becoming more hostile. Still, Elias focused on the task ahead. The trial began, and one by one, the contestants disappeared into the maze. The labyrinth was a marvel of Kithan design, constantly shifting and testing the limits of perception and strategy. Elias relied on his instincts, carefully observing the maze's subtle patterns to anticipate its movements. But as he turned a corner, a sudden explosion rocked the passageway ahead of him. The force knocked him off his feet, and debris rained down, blocking his path. Coughing, Elias pushed himself up, his heart pounding. Someone had sabotaged the maze, and he had a strong suspicion about who was behind it. Heart pounding, Elias took a deep breath, steadying himself as he examined the rubble around him. That explosion, that wasn't part of the simulation. His sharp eyes scanned the debris, searching for answers. Scorch marks. That was all the confirmation he needed. This wasn't just an accident. Someone had deliberately planted an explosive. His jaw tightened at the realization. Someone wanted him out of the competition, not just defeated but eliminated. Despite the revelation, Elias refused to let it shake him. If anything, it only hardened his resolve. He quickly surveyed his surroundings, searching for an alternate route. The path ahead was blocked by collapsed stone and jagged wreckage, but his keen instincts soon spotted a narrow crevice along the far wall. Without hesitation, he squeezed through the tight space, his muscles straining as he forced himself forward. When he finally emerged into a larger chamber, he paused for a moment to regain his bearings. His training as an explorer kicked in. He had been in worse situations before, and he wasn't about to let sabotage deter him. Every trial in the maze was designed to test his adaptability, and he would use those very challenges to his advantage. He pressed on, deftly navigating traps, deciphering intricate puzzles, and using his quick thinking to outmaneuver the obstacles thrown in his way. Whoever had set the explosion had underestimated him. Meanwhile, high above the arena, Princess Vil watched from the observation deck, her sharp eyes narrowing as she observed the explosion through the holographic display. A frown tugged at her lips. That shouldn't have happened. The trials were rigorous, yes, but they were never meant to be lethal. Someone had interfered. "Kale," she said, her voice low but firm. "Investigate this." "Yes, Your Highness," her advisor replied, already moving to carry out her command. Below, Elias pressed forward, his determination unwavering. He refused to let fear control him. He had come too far to falter now. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of trials and challenges, he arrived at the central chamber. At its heart, resting atop a pedestal, was the glowing starstone. The artifact pulsed with a soft, ethereal light, illuminating the cavern in a celestial glow. Relief washed over him, but it was quickly tempered by renewed focus. He had completed the trial, but now he had to make it back. Clutching the starstone tightly, Elias retraced his steps, carefully avoiding the dangers he had previously bypassed. By the time he emerged from the maze, the grand court was in an uproar. Whispers filled the air, murmurs of awe and disbelief echoing throughout the chamber. Not only had he completed the trial, but he had also survived an attempt on his life. Princess Vil stood at the center of the royal platform, her expression unreadable as she met his gaze. Yet, there was something in her eyes, something different. Concern. "Captain Grant," she addressed him, her voice steady yet laced with an undertone of something he couldn't quite place. "It seems you faced more than just the trial today." Elias returned her gaze, his tone calm but resolute. "It'll take more than that to stop me." A flicker of something crossed Vil's face. Admiration, perhaps? She wasn't sure. What she did know was that Elias Grant was not like the others. As the excitement in the court slowly subsided, Vil found herself retreating to the palace gardens, seeking a moment of solitude. The evening air was cool, carrying the distant hum of the city beyond the palace walls. She let the sounds of the night wash over her, but her mind remained restless. No matter how she tried to push it away, the image of Elias emerging from the maze, triumphant and unscathed, lingered in her thoughts. He was different. Unlike the suitors who had come before him, men who saw her as nothing more than a prize to be won, Elias treated her differently. He didn't bow before her like a reverent subject, nor did he fawn over her with flowery words. He looked at her, not as a princess, not as a ruler, but as a person. "You've been avoiding me," came a voice from behind her. Vil turned sharply, her gaze locking onto Elias as he stepped into the moonlight. His expression was calm but unwavering, his eyes searching hers without hesitation. "I've been busy," she replied, keeping her tone neutral. "Busy or just avoiding?" Elias challenged, stepping closer. "I know you don't trust me." But I think I've earned at least a moment of your time." She hesitated. No one spoke to her like this. No one except him. "You seem different from the others," she finally admitted. "You have no fear of me. You don't see me as a prize." Elias smiled, though there was no arrogance in it. "That's because you're not a prize, Vil. You're a person, with responsibilities, with hopes and fears. People treat you as the crown you wear, but I see you for who you are." Her heart skipped a beat. His words struck deeper than she expected, and she wasn't sure how to respond. "And what about you?" she asked, her voice quieter now. "What do you want from me, Elias?" He held her gaze, unwavering and sincere. "I don't want to control you, Vil. I want to stand beside you. Humanity has learned to survive through partnerships, through trust. I think we could offer each other something that no one else can." She studied him carefully, feeling the weight of his words settle in her chest. For the first time, she wondered if there was something more between them than just a contest. Elias didn't just challenge her in the trials, he challenged her way of thinking, her beliefs, even her very idea of leadership. "I'm not sure I believe in partnerships," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not the way you do." Elias chuckled, his voice warm. "That's all right. You don't have to believe in it yet. But think about it. Humanity doesn't have all the answers, but we've learned that strength comes from working together. If you ever need someone to talk to, without politics, without games, I'll be here." For the first time in a long while, Vil felt something shift within her. A possibility. A future she hadn't considered before. And as she stood there beneath the stars, she wondered if Elias Grant was the only one who truly saw her, not as a ruler, but as herself. Vil felt the tiniest crack in her walls, and for the first time in a long while, she wasn't sure what it meant. Something in Elias's words lingered in her mind, an echo that refused to fade. Could this human truly offer her something no other being had? The tension in the palace had reached a boiling point, and despite her focus on the trials and Elias's growing presence, she couldn't ignore the whispers that seemed to follow her every step. Something was off about recent events. First, there had been sabotage during the survival trial. Then, Elias's unexpected success, against all odds. And, now, a gnawing sense that forces were working behind the scenes. Forces that did not want him to win. Vil sat in her private chamber, the flickering light casting long shadows across the ornate walls. Across from her sat Kale, her trusted advisor, the one person who had been by her side through countless political crises. His wisdom and loyalty had always been a pillar of strength for her. But tonight, as she studied his expression, she saw something different in his eyes. Concern, perhaps even fear. "Your Highness," Kale said, his voice low, "there's something I must tell you." Vil leaned forward slightly, sensing the weight of his words. "Go on." "There are factions within the court who do not want Captain Grant to succeed," he continued. "They see his rise as a threat to their influence. Some of them are willing to go to any lengths to ensure he fails." Vil's eyes narrowed. "What are you suggesting, Kale?" "That someone is actively sabotaging the contest," he said grimly. "I have received word from reliable sources. There are powerful members of the court who have aligned themselves with the other suitors, particularly Gorth. They fear that if the human wins and aligns with you, it will shift the balance of power in the galaxy." Vil stood abruptly, pacing the room as her mind raced. Politics had always been ruthless, but this was deeper than she had realized. Betrayal ran like a hidden current beneath the surface, and the idea that some of her trusted court members would go so far as to manipulate the contest shook her. "And what exactly do they plan to do?" she asked, her voice colder now. "They've been planting false rumors, feeding doubt among the other species," Kale explained. They've also begun quietly sabotaging the trials. Gorth is a key figure in this plot, but he is not acting alone. Someone else is pulling the strings. Vill's hands clenched into fists. If the conspirators were allowed to succeed, it would not only end the contest unfairly, but could also lead to unrest within her kingdom. Gorth, with his brute strength and arrogance, was clearly involved, but she had a feeling the real mastermind was someone far more cunning. "We need proof," she said decisively. "Without evidence, the council will never believe us. I want you to gather as much information as you can. We'll confront this head-on." Kale bowed. "I will begin immediately, Your Highness." As he left the room, a chill settled over Vil. Doubt crept into her heart like a slow-moving shadow. How many of those around her were truly on her side? She had always believed in the loyalty of her people, but now she wasn't sure who she could trust. Later that night, as she walked the palace halls, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her. The cold silence of the empty corridors felt oppressive, as though the walls themselves were closing in. She pulled her cloak tighter around her shoulders and exhaled, her breath barely visible in the dim light. Her thoughts turned to Elias. His quiet determination had earned her respect, and now, to her own surprise, she felt something else, a strange sense of protectiveness toward him. He had fought hard for his place in this contest, and she wasn't going to let him be taken down by unseen forces. No one was going to stop him from reaching the end. The next morning, a heavy silence hung over the royal palace. Vil felt the weight of the conspiracy pressing down on her. There were traitors among her court, people she had trusted for years, and now they were working against her. She knew she had to act quickly, but carefully. If she moved too soon, the conspirators might twist the situation against her, casting doubt on her leadership. She needed a plan. She needed an ally. There was only one person who might be able to help her: Elias. She sent a message, instructing him to meet her in the palace gardens, away from the prying eyes of the court. The Chateau garden was one of the few places where she could find peace, filled with vibrant alien flowers and the gentle sound of flowing water. But today, her meeting had a different purpose. Elias arrived promptly, his expression composed as ever. His keen eyes scanned the surroundings before settling on her. Despite his calm demeanor, she sensed the caution beneath the surface. "You wanted to see me, Princess?" he asked, his voice warm but measured. Vil nodded, motioning for him to walk with her. Side by side, they moved through the garden, their footsteps soft against the stone path. "There's something you need to know," Vil began, her voice steady. "I've uncovered something troubling. There are people in my court conspiring against you. They're trying to sabotage the contest to ensure you don't win." Elias didn't react immediately, but she saw the sharp glint in his eyes. "I had a feeling," he admitted. "Things have been too convenient, too many obstacles appearing at just the right moment." She glanced at him, appreciating his perceptiveness. "It's worse than we thought," she said. "Gorth is involved, but he's just a pawn. There's someone else pulling the strings, someone powerful." Elias exhaled slowly, processing her words. "So what do we do?" Vil met his gaze, determination burning in her chest. "We find out who they are. We gather proof. And when the time is right, we strike back." For the first time, she saw something flicker in Elias's expression. Not just understanding, but resolve. He nodded. "Then let's do it. They fear what you represent, humanity's unexpected success. They don't want you to become an ally, and they certainly don't want to see us working together." Elias stopped walking, turning to face her. For a moment, his expression was unreadable, his eyes searching hers, as if trying to decipher the weight behind her words. Then, he let out a quiet breath, his shoulders easing just slightly. "I had a feeling something was off," he admitted. The sabotage, the tension. I knew there was more going on than just the contest. Vale studied him carefully, her gaze unwavering. I can't take this on alone, she said. I need someone I can trust, someone who isn't bound by the rules of the court, someone who can act outside the system. Elias raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Then, slowly, he nodded. You want me to help you fight back against this conspiracy? Vale gave him a solemn look. Yes, but it won't. Be easy. We need to gather evidence, expose those behind it, and ensure they can't manipulate the contest any further. I can't do this without you, Elias. You see things differently than the others? A small, determined smile tugged at the corners of Elias's lips. Well, I'm not one to back down from a challenge. Besides, he hesitated for only a second before adding, You've proven yourself worth fighting for, Vale. Her heart skipped at his words, a sensation she hadn't expected, but she quickly pushed the feeling aside. There was no time for emotions, now. They had a mission, a truth that needed to be unearthed and a fight that needed to be won. Elias had already been targeted, and if they weren't careful, the next attempt on his life would succeed. We need to work quickly, Vale said, firmly. The council is already beginning to whisper. If we don't act fast, they'll turn the tide against us. Elias nodded. Then we don't just confront them, we outsmart them, and I think I know a few tricks that might help. Vale watched. Him, a rare sense of partnership settling over her. She had spent years keeping others at a distance, but here, in this moment, she felt something different. Perhaps, just perhaps, this human, with his wit, his resourcefulness, was the ally she had been searching for all along. Together, they turned toward the palace, their resolve solidified. The battle for the truth was only just beginning. The tension in the grand hall was palpable. The final trial had arrived, and with it, Elias's last chance to prove himself. The stakes had never been higher. Princess Vale had watched Elias closely throughout the contest. With every passing trial, her admiration for him had grown, not just for his skill, but for his mind, his heart, his ability to rise above adversity with grace. But now, the contest was no longer just about who would win. It was about something greater. It was about proving that humanity belonged, that they had the strength, the wisdom, and the courage to stand shoulder to shoulder with the galaxy's most powerful civilizations. The hall was filled with delegates from across the stars, their expressions unreadable as they prepared to witness the final test. The rules were simple. Each suitor would command a fleet through a simulated galactic crisis. They would have to navigate treacherous space anomalies, outwit rival fleets, and ensure the safety of their crew. But the real challenge was not just in surviving, it was in inspiring loyalty, unity, and trust among their teams. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing the simulated battlefield, a vast expanse of dangerous space filled with asteroid fields, nebulae, and hostile forces waiting in ambush. Each suitor was given control of a fleet, their ships, poised at the edge of the chaos, ready to be tested. Elias stood at his command console, his eyes sharp with focus. His competitors, including Gorth, were all seasoned leaders, battle-hardened and strategic. But Elias had something they lacked, an ability to think beyond the conventional. He wasn't relying on sheer firepower or preset tactics. He was relying on human ingenuity, the very trait that had seen his species through countless crises. "Captain Grant," came Vale's voice over the comms, calm yet expectant. "Are you prepared to face the final test?" Elias smirked, his fingers dancing across the console. Always. The simulation began in an instant, throwing the fleets into chaos. Asteroids collided, debris was sent hurtling through space, and hostile ships closed in from all directions. The other suitors reacted as expected, immediate aggressive commands to attack, to overpower the enemy through sheer force. Elias took a different approach. Instead of charging forward, he ordered his fleet to scatter. Smaller units broke off, maneuvering into unexpected positions, flanking enemies from multiple angles. "Communicate with your allies," he instructed his fleet. His voice was calm, commanding, but never authoritarian. "We're stronger together. Protect the vulnerable ships, cover each other's weaknesses, and strike only when the moment is right." As the battle raged, his fleet operated like a well-oiled machine. His ships supported each other, adapting, reacting, shifting strategy in real time, while the other suitors' fleets relied on rigid formations and brute strength. Elias's forces flowed like a river, turning the battlefield into their advantage. Across the hall, Vale watched, her admiration deepening. She had seen great leaders before, but none quite like him. His competitors led through force, through dominance, through unwavering command. Elias led through trust. His crew followed him not because they feared him, but because they believed in him. He didn't just command a fleet, he inspired one. The simulation reached its climax, the battlefield littered with the remains of crushed fleets. When the dust settled, one commander stood victorious: Elias. The hall fell into silence before erupting into murmurs. Some whispered in awe, others in discontent. Humanity's success had been proven undeniable. Elias turned away from the console, his expression calm despite the enormity of what had just occurred. He met Vale's gaze, and for the first time, she allowed herself a small smile. Perhaps this had never just been about a contest. Perhaps this had been about something far greater from the start. Together, they had exposed the truth, and together, they had won. As the final minutes of the simulation ticked away, the battlefield was a chaotic whirlwind of fire and destruction. Yet amidst the turmoil, one force remained steadfast, cutting through the opposition with unshakable precision. Elias Grant's fleet had emerged victorious, while the other suitors had suffered heavy losses, with nearly half their ships obliterated. In the skirmish, Elias's fleet remained largely intact. Only a handful of his vessels bore any significant damage, a testament to his strategic brilliance. His methods had been unconventional, but they had proven undeniably effective. The moment the battle concluded, Kell's voice rang through the vast hall, amplified by the grandeur of the occasion. "Captain Elias Grant has won the final trial," he announced, his voice carrying the weight of the moment. "His leadership and quick thinking have proven unparalleled." The hall erupted in thunderous applause. Nobles, dignitaries, and officials who had gathered to witness the contest cheered in admiration. But not everyone in the room celebrated. Standing on the royal balcony, her piercing gaze locked onto Elias, was Princess Vil. While the others basked in the spectacle of victory, she remained still, her expression unreadable. To the court, this had been a competition, a means to determine the worthiest suitor. But to Vil, it had been something far more significant. This was not just about selecting a partner. It was about discovering a leader. And in Elias, she had found something she never expected. Elias stood tall amidst the cheers, his eyes scanning the victorious fleet that had carried him to triumph. Yet his focus inevitably returned to Vil. He had come here not for wealth or glory, but to prove himself, and not just to her, but to an entire civilization that had doubted humanity's place among them. As the echoes of applause began to fade, the reality of the moment settled over the room. The contest was over. Elias had won. But the true test was yet to come. The decision now lay in Vil's hands. Would she choose him? The other suitors, their fates sealed by their defeat, had already been dismissed. Some left with dignity. Others, like Korth of the Thrawn Dominion, seethed with wounded pride. He lingered at the sidelines, his glare burning with resentment. Yet Elias paid him no mind. There was only one person in the room who mattered now. Princess Vil stepped forward, her every movement commanding silence. The court hung on her every word, awaiting her final decision. She took a slow, deliberate breath before speaking. "I have watched each of you closely," she began, her voice steady, unwavering. "Every suitor who entered this contest brought something of value: bravery, wealth, power. Each sought to prove themselves worthy. But there is one among you who has shown me something greater." Elias's heart pounded, though he kept his expression measured. He had anticipated this moment, prepared for it, and yet the weight of it still pressed upon him. He had never relied on grand gestures or displays of opulence. All he had ever offered was himself, his skill, his mind, his unwavering commitment to his cause. Ville's gaze never wavered. "Captain Elias Grant," she continued, her tone both formal and deeply personal, "you have demonstrated that strength is not measured solely by power or resources. You have shown me that true leadership lies in understanding, in respect, in unity. Through every challenge, you have proven that humanity brings something unique to this galaxy, something no other species has matched." A hush fell over the room. Even those who had been skeptical of Elias's presence now held their breath. Ville's voice softened as she took another step closer to him. "But this decision is not just about the trials or the victory you have won today. It is about something far greater." Her expression, so often guarded, shifted, just slightly. "Elias, I am not choosing you simply because you succeeded in this contest. I am choosing you because you have shown me that I do not have to face this world alone." A deep silence stretched between them, but within it, an understanding passed unspoken. Elias had fought not to win a throne, nor to claim a title. He had fought to prove himself, to earn the trust of a woman who had tested him at every turn. He had fought to show her that humanity was worth believing in, and in doing so he had gained something far more valuable than a crown. He had gained her respect. Ville took another step closer until they stood only a breath apart, her voice, once commanding, now barely above a whisper. "Elias," she said, her eyes searching his, "will you stand with me? Not as a suitor, not as a victor, but as an equal? Will you be my partner? Not just in name, but in every way that matters?" For the first time in this long and arduous contest, Elias allowed himself to smile, not a smirk of triumph, nor a calculated display of confidence, but a genuine, quiet smile that reached his eyes. He stepped forward, meeting her gaze with steady resolve. "Yes, Ville," he said, his voice firm yet warm. "I will stand by your side, not as a prize to be won, but as a partner. In everything." The room erupted once more in applause, louder than before. The court had their answer. But to Elias and Ville, the crowd was a distant murmur. In that moment, the only thing that mattered was the unspoken promise between them. As the cheers echoed, through the chamber, Ville looked up at him, her eyes shining with something new. Not just admiration, not just respect, hope. For the first time in her life, Ville felt as though she had found someone who saw her not just as a ruler, but as a person. Someone who would stand beside her, not because of obligation or ambition, but because he chose to. And as for Elias, he knew this was more than a victory. This was the beginning of something far greater, an alliance that would shape the future of the galaxy, forged not through power or wealth, but through trust, respect, and an unwavering belief in what they could achieve together.